What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo. In this episode of the PGA Show, going to be breaking down all things Valero Texas Open. Got a special guest this week. I'll bring him in here in a second, but excited to get to this show. I actually haven't done a show yet with our guy over here, but just to talk about it, we're going to break down all things for ownership, roster construction, the tiers, any questions that you have in the chat, of course, some weather thoughts, anything that we've got there and more. We'll break it all down, but shout out to everybody joining us in the chat. And Bubbles, big week for SHIPIT last week. Let's do it again. It was. We had, including yourself, Bubbles, 3 Fantasy Golf World Championship seats. Shout out to our guy, Kenny W. Just lots of winners. Shalou, bunch of others in the chat. And then, lots of people winning, $100 into 3,000, different things like that. So you absolutely love to see it. Going to bring in our man, though, GS Luke. You guys know him. He helps us out with all of our Showdown content right now. Luke, what's going on, man? Excited to do the show with you this week.
Yeah, nothing much. Just getting ready for this week. We had some Masters pricing drop this morning, so was doing a little bit of a deep dive on that side, but stoked for this week out there before the Masters. I got some people probably looking ahead out there to the first major, but somebody's going to win. Somebody's got to take down a few GPPs, so I'm stoked from that aspect.
Yeah, and shout out to our guy, DGen. Big call last week on Min Woo, the one guy he played, and that was the guy on the cover, and he got the job done. My dad played Min Woo and one and done. His first ever one and done picking the winner. He's played one and done last year, never got to a winner this year, got Min Woo Lee, so shout out to him as well, Papa Tambo. But Luke, talk to us a little bit about this event before we get into it. We always like to get right to it. But this one here at the Valero, we know a lot about this course. We know a lot about sort of how the weather can play down there. What's your thoughts are out there for you? I'm the Canadian talking about the South here, but what do you know about this event coming in? What are your first thoughts on that week before the Masters as well? So it could be a little bit of a lull out there, but anything you can give us on the Valero Texas Open. And then is there anything you're seeing with weather as well? Obviously Wednesday night, we'll have that covered, but just curious if you saw anything there.
Yeah, so this course we know a whole bunch about because we've had it for such a long time out here. And weather always is something we have to keep track of because those Texas courses, it can go from calm to 20, 30 miles an hour, just like that. I mean, it happens in 15, 20 minutes at times. And like you were kind of hinting at towards the end there, Friday, it looks like it could be the day to keep an eye on. Early in the day, they're calling for maybe some thunderstorms to come through. And then the afternoon, 20 miles an hour of sustained winds and gusts that, at least as of now, in some of the models are in that 25 to 30 range. So the thunderstorms could cause a delay, could have one wave or the other really getting hit by some storms out there. So it's something that I don't know if we can really lean into right now because they're kind of all over the place right now, the models that is. But it is something to keep an eye on because historically, Texas, Florida is where the weather can really go out there and wreak havoc. So I'll be looking at that for sure. This golf course as well, we kind of know that it's not a bomber's fest as well. We've seen a lot of shorter to even like average distance guys have a lot of success here, which I like the week before the Masters. Next week, it's going to be a stud that probably goes out there and wins. This week, it could be anyone across the board. So it makes it more of an interesting week when it comes to the game theory. And I think you can take some shots further down the board. Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking about too when we get to it and playing it, because one thing I remember myself from my notes for Valero each year is the weather waves. You kind of just stack no matter what, because it definitely can happen in Texas. We've seen it plenty of years, just blow away the other side, pun intended. And then also the thought process there is that people always go up to the top. I don't think we have tee times just yet. They should be coming out here shortly, right? So I don't know. Did you see tee times yet? I didn't see them pop out yet. No?
I think they'll be coming out here in like an hour, something like that.
That's what I'm thinking. So they'll be out shortly, but I am curious to see how they split it at the top. But I think that's another thing is people often, when they go this way, they're going to say, and we'll get there, but they're going to go to Ludwig, Tommy, Cantlay, Connors, and just assume, and you can plug Matsuyama and some others into that mix, but I have to have one of these guys. When you're playing the wave stack specifically, it doesn't even matter if it's for a weather advantage or just in general playing wave stacks to get a little bit naturally unique. Nothing says you can leave $1,000 on the table. It's not the be all end all. It's in Showdown, I'll sometimes leave 3,000-4,000 on the table. And I know not everybody agrees with that, but I've had a high level of success doing that. And it's certain events, certain weather edges, things like that. But at least in Classic, you don't have to go up to somebody just because you can. And you'll find that as you go down the board as well. There's some more tricks and tips to that stuff as well. I love talking about building in sets, wave stacking in general. Shout out to Yobi Trice, real name, no gimmicks. My $200 single entry lineup. Can I have your opinions, please? Would you recommend a swap on any of these? I'll kick it to you, Luke. I mean, full lineups this early, no tee times. Not like we don't know enough about this yet, really, anyway. But anybody there that stands out as like a horrible play to you, or anything else you want to mention?
So yeah, I guess if I'm being super nitpicky about it, like Collie is going to be super chalky. right? I guess that's the one thing I'll say about that lineup, but you're in a single entry. So, I don't know if you have to be that worried about ownership on one spot. But yeah, it's definitely a little early to be looking at the lineups.
Appreciate you, Yobi. I mean, out here, he had another comment earlier. I'm not sure if this one was true or not, but said Luke was at the so maybe he's feeling good right now. But we'll see what he says.
Oh gosh, cheers.
Another guy with a big week. I know he was sweating a FGWC seat, got the job done. And remember, Scooter, I'm happy for you because you were saying you're being realistic about it on Saturday night. I saw in the Discord you said I'm not calling it yet. People are like, oh, Cut Sweat says you at 93% or 90-something%. You're like, that's fine. And I've dropped before from even higher than that, but you held on. And I think it was 9 or 10 point victory. So it wasn't like there was no sweat there. That's the whole point. 91%. I don't trust it ever. It's like the model on Data Golf for the Cut Sweat. Sometimes it's like, man, I've seen that thing swing quite a bit. But yeah, lots of good stuff going on. And his point on Kenny Nation. Yeah, Kenny had another huge week. He won on, I think, everything but NASCAR over the weekend. He just crushes it. So shout out to Kenny. But yeah, this is going to be a good show. We're going to break it all down for you guys and more. I also think in that lineup previously, and I'll pull up SaberSim here in a bit, that I think Corey Connors feels like the guy people like up top. He's 10-1. He's not quite as much as the others. It's going to be one of these weeks, man. Well, let me get your thoughts on this quick because we never get to hang out and do these shows together. Yeah. Is when or if, I don't even know how to put it, is Tommy Fleetwood going to win on the PGA Tour? Like, come on, this is what people want to know.
No. So every time I get asked that question, I used to be the guy that would take a shot on Fleetwood outrights. He's going to win outside of the United States. I think my guy LSU Nick probably has the best theory on it. He's probably going to win the Scottish Open over there where it's technically a PGA Tour event and it's not in the United States because he's got everything it takes to win. He's the best player, bar none, that doesn't have a win at this point. But anytime I get asked that question, I just have to say no. I've got to see it first before I say that it's always going to win.
And honestly, this is the one. So like events like this just give me sort of that thought process. I know it's just a random thing and it's not real. It's just a thought. But it's like, how would you ever play Fleetwood when you have a guy like Oberg right there? Yep. And then you got Connors and guys like that are hot playing down below. Bhatia was, I believe, wasn't he last year's winner here where he had to take a 5-minute break to take the shirt off? We're like, buddy, just get the shot. He came back with the tape, but he said he couldn't take his shirt off in public, even though the time that he came out of the damn water with no shirt on and everyone was all framing that up. Like, Akshay, look at him go. So I think that's, the thought process people are going to have here. And I just always think that Tommy's going to win when it's going to be a spot like this. This would, if he's going to, if, then that would be the thought. What else do we got here? The chat, everyone's talking about different things. Jordan Spieth confirmed. Luke Sky. Jordan Spieth's your guy?
Yeah, I bet him this week too. So it's one of those weeks. I usually just bet him, don't say anything about it. But this week I went on a limb. I talked him up. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and you can't say this. This guy's sleepers were dialed for every week. You're going to have bad weeks in the sleepers, but he picked the winner last week of all those golfers in that field. This guy's absolutely dialed in. So
I remember Charlie Hoffman having a really good week as a sleeper too. So he's definitely had some good ones.
He's had a bunch. And this is what it was. Dislocated his shoulder. I remember this, doing the old fist pump. So, All right, cool. Let's keep it rolling here then. Anything else you want to talk about when it comes to Valero Texas Open, the course, the weather, and then anything that as far as like roster construction or just thoughts on the field at hand before we actually go into the tiers?
Yeah, so I'll say up top, I don't really love anyone this week. I feel like you've got Ludwig, great player, great talent, maybe not the best course fit. I feel like up top, I'm just playing the ownership game. Like I'm going to wait till I get my first set of ownership projections to really make up my mind because I could see guys playing a lot of Corey Connors. I've heard Tommy Fleetwood's name thrown out quite a bit as well. If guys like Hideki are maybe going to go a little bit overlooked, I think that you could get some guys at close to 10, maybe 12.5% ownership up there in that 9-10K range. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to see. So, maybe it's a little bit of wishful thinking that some of these players are going to go a little bit overlooked, but like a Keegan Bradley kind of rings that same sort of bell because you've got Spieth around him who's won here before. You've got Akshay, last year's champion. People seem to love the form out there on guys like Daniel Berger and Denny McCarthy. So I feel like there's a few guys up there towards the top end of the board that if we can get it closer to the 10, maybe even lower teens in ownership, then I'm going to be taking a shot on those sort of players because this isn't the sort of field where you've got your Scotties, your Rorys that you may say are almost like must plays out there in some scenarios. I don't have anyone out there in this sort of field like that. So I feel like you could see some balanced lineups as well, especially before Bridgman withdrew. I thought there was going to be a ton of ownership down there in that 8K range, but Collie I've got at probably close to 20% with how much I've seen him thrown around the industry. Guys like Denny McCarthy, I could see getting really chalky as well. But now that Bridgman withdrew, maybe it's not as bad down there in the 8K range. But up top, I'm definitely playing the ownership game. I don't see anyone worthy of being like 40% out.
Yeah, I think that's a good call too. And glad you brought that up. Just want to remind everyone, if they didn't catch it today, Rob Bolton, PGA Tour Comms, all the places underdog that posted out once they get the news. Bridgman at 8,200, who looked like a pretty good option there. He WD'd KH Lee. I don't think anyone was playing him, but just to note, KH Lee's out. And then some of the others were out before. Taylor Moore decided not to wait till, I guess everyone blames him. It's usually PGA Tour Comms and stuff. We've heard it in the past where like players have even said, I gave the info like as soon as I knew, and it didn't get posted out. So you can kind of blame them. But 3 minutes before lock most certainly hurt me last week. I'm usually on it right to the very last second. So nobody to blame but myself, and nobody cares work harder. But I thought like with 5 minutes, you must be okay. And if I'm not getting in 5 minutes, probably not getting it anyway. Could have just global swapped and probably would have had a lot better week, because I think it would have been Ben Griffin at the exact same price for those lineups that didn't have both. So we'll see. People are talking about Cantlay up here. I guess it goes to our Fleetwood conversation too, because we're getting there now. But I brought up SaberSim, and I'm going to show a couple things on this for everybody out there. But let me just sort it by salary first. All I did was a dry run to get 150 lineups just to see what it would spit it out. And I've got the exposures here. I'll show my setup in a second, but not getting very much Fleetwood, right? He's showing, again, these are very early stage SaberSim ownership projections. Like we'll have ours in, the initials go in this afternoon, this evening. I know you work on your stuff quite well. Also, you put a lot of time and effort into it. So just thought process around that is it looks like not many will be playing Fleetwood, and most are either going to go to Corey Connors, who looks pretty popular as is, or they'll go all the way up to Oberg is my guess. But any other thoughts on that just quick before we keep it rolling?
Yeah, so looking at those numbers, it looks like, Corey's going to get steamed. Akshay, too. It looks like compared to some of the other guys around him. Yeah, like if we're going to get 30% plus ownership on these sort of players, I mean, I like Akshay this week. Really good course fit, top 3 over there at the Players Championship as well, but I don't love him that much. Not 40% kind of.
And when you have that range, like that's kind of the other thing too. It's just what you mentioned, though. It seems like, I guess, do you ever hear me talk about this in the past, or you've probably talked about it as well, but I call them lazy weeks.
Yes.
Everyone's pumped up for the Masters. They're going to play some action this week, but you already can literally see in the lobby, there's a $10, the coveted, the be all end all, the $100 Millie Maker contest. And then if you're lucky enough to play some satellites, get into the 33, or if you've got the bankroll to buy in, then congrats to you. I just think that's kind of the setup there. Most are, oodling over the $10 and the $100 as a chance to win $1 million. It does seem like, whether this is correct, I don't think it's fully correct right now. It's the first run, but I think some of the thoughts are that, seeing Connors, Akshay, Denny, who you mentioned earlier, even Siwoo, I definitely think we could see those guys get steamed. And again, what the actual final ownership number will be, probably not these, but I do see them getting up there, like Akshay in the 20s, McCarthy getting up there, Corey Connors being really steamed versus the guys above and below him. So I definitely think some of this is a legit pattern to start things off. And that's what we like to do, is sort of see, okay, the field's kind of building like this. One thing I noticed in doing a quick breeze through and just looking through, not many, if any, 6K guys for quite a while. Like all my top lineups, and I just sorted by projection, which is fine. It just shows you, like, again, if you have a sleeper down in the 6Ks, play them. The difference between 72 and 73 and some of these other guys, 71, I'm sure you can find a guy. But 7K flat, like here's Joel Damon. Maybe he's popular in the 6K range. We saw him earlier in our boy out there, Yobi Trice, got the single entry up. He had Damon into it, but I always talk about this, and 6,900 doesn't mean anything. It's just they stopped fitting 7K guys. So he's basically a 7K guy. Wouldn't have changed your mind if he was that. But definitely seeing here, a lot of people are just going, the dry run is just going 10-9, and then either an 8 with 3 7s, depending on how low their 10s are and 9s are, or something like this Connors, McCarthy, a bunch of 7Ks. Like you can easily fit that. And I know we haven't got there yet, and we'll do it by tiers when we get there, but just rolling through it really quickly. It looks like 42 golfers, 41 now with Taylor Moore out. So 41 golfers in the 7K range this week. So I thought, that was just a thought there. Is there any, do you have anything on like 6K range and playing sleepers and finding your dudes down there? How do you handle the 6K range?
So it usually comes down to what I want to do up top. Like when you got a Scotty at 12, 13K, you're going to have some 6K guys out in the pool. This week, there's not a lot of guys down there that I love. Like for my preview I did earlier this week, the cheapest I went for a value play was $7,200. That's as low as I felt comfortable going for somebody that I'm going to play in over 15% of my lineups. So I kind of like what they're doing with the dry run there. I agree with that kind of lineup construction, especially because it is a weaker field down low. I mean, they literally don't have enough players to fill up the field. With all the withdrawals we've had, we're down to 147 players from 156. It's one where I think avoiding the 6K range, especially like in single entries, that sort of thing. Some of your higher dollar GBPs, like maybe the big $250 single entries, that sort of thing. I'm probably sticking away from those 6K guys. And it's not like they can't get there, but I don't see a reason to force yourself to that range unless there's guys up top that you love. Like if you like that Bear lineup and then trying to sneak in like a Hideki as a second man in, there's probably a few players that you can sneak in to do that with, but there's not a ton I love down there.
Yeah, and you can do it a different way, but I was just going through to see like one of the Damon lineups and what it looks like, and it's not that crazy. Like it's still Connors, Matsuyama, but then 3 7K guys. It just goes to a couple of the higher price 7K guys in Griffin and Woodland versus down at the bottom where you could easily, that's the full 50K max. Bring either of these guys down $100 and you're right back to 7K flat. So, I mean, you just see exactly how they're being built out, and you'll have to look for different angles in. Maybe it's, skipping the 9K range, which we're kind of going there in a second anyway, but with Decky and Akshay and McCarthy, I think a lot of lineups are going to have at least one of those guys in it. So that's just an example of how to get different there. Is there any other thoughts you have up in the 10K range that you wanted to talk about before we move on? Or is there anybody else that you want to sort of mention that you see up there that others aren't talking about?
No, I don't think so in particular. I guess down in the 8K range, I have a few more takes, but yeah, up top, I think we've touched on a lot of it.
All right, before we go to it, we'll save it. I do want to remind everyone very quickly just of the promo going on. So if you want to get SaberSim, if you want to get rolling, MLB is back. Shout out to our boy Nades, been absolutely crushing it amongst others, but just on fire for him right now, helping out the community a ton. But this is not just for MLB. We have all access for $99 a month, including SaberSim. That gets you all the major sports going on right now with NBA, MMA, PGA, MLB, NHL rounding out, all of that stuff and more. And then you get the education courses, all that. But we have a promo, MLB 50. You just go to the site. It's the $99 core plan, all access plus SaberSim core, and you knock off $50. So you can get your first month for $49. Why is that important? Why you're watching a golf show? Why might you want that? Well, the Masters is next week. So on top of all the other good stuff going on, you'll get this week, you'll get acclimated to using the optimizer with SaberSim. You can upgrade it later down the road. You can change it, cancel it, do whatever you want at any time. But there's no better deal than $49 to get all access for all the sports we cover, the education courses, the Discord, which is extremely helpful. And then on top of that, get SaberSim and start getting used to it there. So good promo to get in on. I'm going to quickly show this, Luke. I don't know like how you go about organizing an optimizer, but one thing I like about this, and I set it up, members always talk about it or want to know sort of how I'm setting things up. I have it on the full screen mode. You can turn that off or on with this button. I like to be able to see it. But if you turn it on, and you can kind of get the exact same look as if you were on SaberSim's website. I like to have it golfer, price, tee time, especially if I'm trying to figure it out on a week-to-week basis, something like Valero Open. I'm going to want to text, I'm going to want to know that. The ownership, the exposure is my exposure after I run it the way I want to run it. We've just run a dry run now, but just to note it, that gives me the leverage. So now I know, okay, again, these are dry run numbers. They're not the fully correct ownership numbers yet because we're still early. But if this was correct and I have this much, I'm underweight on Ludwig. Then I can change my min-max exposures. And I know people care a lot about the projection, so I throw it there. But realistically, the projection and the pricing is what's it's like, well, I don't need value. I kind of know exactly what it's doing here. Clearly, Corey Connors must have a pretty good projection. And you look, it's not that far away from Ludwig. But because he's $700 cheaper, boom, the obvious. I'm getting a bunch more. But if people are wondering how to set it up and an easy way to use it when you're rebuilding and you're changing your min-maxes and stuff like that, if you want to use it that way, I certainly like setting it up this way. How do you sort of go about using an optimizer? Just off topic for a second, but do you do stuff like this as well? Do you build in sets for the waves? Like how do you use yours?
Absolutely. So I have an optimizer I've coded myself that looks very similar when I'm going and building lineups. You want to know your exposure. You want to know your leverage on every single player. And you ideally want a way to set those min and max exposures. So what you have up there is essentially the same exact thing that I'm looking at. there's a couple other data points I have, like ceiling, for example. Like I'll put a player's ceiling potential out there just to kind of have that in the back of my mind as well. But when it comes to using an optimizer, it's a tool, right? It's never just going to like give you guys the absolute nuts. So that's the one thing that I always keep in mind when I'm using an optimizer is, what you're actually using it for, right? And how you can give it to give you exactly what you're looking for. When I start off, I actually love what you're doing here by running a dry run. It's one of my favorite things to do. Just kind of like upload my projections, see what's going on with the ownership. And I'll even take a look at other websites. I'll upload their projections to see what the top players are looking like, just to kind of get a sense of like what the top projecting players are. So, and that example you gave between Corey Connors and then who was it up top? Corey Connors, maybe Akshay, or that was Ludwig, sorry, that you were comparing right there. That's the kind of stuff that you can get going out there and running a dry run. You can see just how it's going to actually come out when it comes to the exposures, because when a player is only projecting off by like 0.1, 0.2 points, $700 difference is massive out there on the optimizer. So I do a lot of that same kind of stuff myself.
Yeah, I think that's a key component to note. And I have it sort of by price because the way we're doing the content and doing the show, and we're kind of looking and mixing and matching. It's interesting when you do it this way. That's why I like to have it set up like this, is I can see right away, not just my leverage, but the discrepancies of the guys within the same range. Like who is somebody that looks good, but not good enough that people are fully committing to it. It's like, well, they know he's probably a pretty good option, but they're over committing, or the optimizers are over committing to a certain play. And I love what you said there, is like, you nailed it. I can't explain this enough to people. Obviously, I talk about a lot of this stuff inside the Mastermind project. I know you helped me out with a ton of stuff, but you're going to help me out a little bit more there. But just going through it with the community there as well, and explaining that the setup of the people always say, oh, SaberSim gave me this. SaberSim took our whatever projections and ownership you're using, most likely ours or theirs or a blend, and it took what that was and gave you the output. If you do nothing else with it, then that's what it is. But like you said, you can change it up to make the optimizer give you what you want. You can set your pool first, turn everybody off, turn everyone on that you want, and then set up rules and restrictions and min maxes and all this other stuff to get exactly what you want. And then SaberSim is just the tool doing the work for you. It's your plans, right? It's you created the vision. I'm building an office in my backyard. There's plans that I get, and here's what I want. And then I change them up with the architect, whoever's putting it together. This is what it needs to look like. Here's the blueprint. Now, go out and build it. And that's the tools, is the people coming out to build it. It's the same thing. This is the tool. SaberSim's going out and building your masterpiece. And you should be reviewing your lineups before you hit submit. If there's something off, don't put, if you wanted 15% burger this week, then don't let it submit with 7.3%. Don't save those lineups or print those lineups out to put into your stuff if that's not what you wanted. So that's the key, right? You can do it. Yeah, like Nate says, the tool is as good as the outputs you give it. So good in, good out. And I will say, Jordan, that's a great point, but also true. And it's not against you on this, just saying, well, I agree with it, but it's noted that sometimes what are good lineups perform poorly. Sometimes bad lineups perform great. It's as long as that's why the key I always talk about is getting what you want. And no tool, in my opinion, does it better than SaberSim. That's why we're so excited about the partnership, is because we've got good projections, good ownership. We're always working to make those better. But this can make competitive lineups for you, even if you didn't do all the work. You can put 90% of the way in, and hopefully you could get a little bit out of that on the difference. So I love to see that. I do want to just hit one point, and then we'll go to the 9K range quickly. But for Brian, I'm going to assume you're a grandfathered member with SHIPIT Nation, which is awesome for the price, or you're a core only member. Just to note on that, our initials don't come out until about Tuesday, late afternoon, evening, where our stuff will be up. And under my ownership, you'll see SHIPIT Nation down here under the SaberSim stuff. And under projection, you'll see SHIPIT Nation under here right now. If you are somebody who likes to get ahead, that's what we try and explain to people. The core plan comes with, at the top, SHIPIT Nation content, our projections and ownership for 8 sports. So they won't be in there until they come out. But if you see in column number 3, where it says SaberSim Optimizer, and the second up from the bottom where it says projections ownership 11 plus sports, that is a second set, and their initials just come out a little bit earlier. But as you can see, there's obviously accuracy stuff and things that we need to work on throughout. But hopefully that clears that up. And that's, like Nate says, that's the advantage moving it up to that package, which won't stay at that price much longer, especially if you're going with the annual, because it works out to $99 a month when SaberSim charges $97 a month themselves just for the optimizer. You're getting all of the SHIPIT Nation content included. So let's go to the 9K range here, Luke. People already talked a little bit about Decky, Bhatia, we talked about a ton. McCarthy, we talked about a ton. This is where I could see it's being, going back to your guy, Spieth earlier, you're talking about betting Spieth and being on him. I could see guys like Spieth who are showing, again, early stages, but low ownership, low exposure. Keegan Bradley, lower ownership, much lower than Hideki and Bhatia, again, early, but lower exposure. And Berger, all in the similar camp. And one of them looks like right now Spieth could be less than both of them. But that to me feels like the plays that you could separate yourself with at the top, where clearly they have the talent that people are just naturally deciding that it has to be Bhatia again. It has to be Denny McCarthy. Because, those two were there at the end last year. Why wouldn't that be the case, right? It has to be the same. Give me your thoughts on this 9K range, man.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of that lazy week narrative that you're talking about before, where people go, oh, Bhatia's in great form. He almost won. Well, did win here last year. Why not go out there and roll with him again? Corey Connors won here multiple times, has been in contention lately. Why not roll with him again? Well, because golf is a 4-letter word, right? It's chaos for a reason out here. Makes you want to, swear all over the golf course at times. That's why, right? You try to avoid some of those players. So I like what you were saying out there with some players, and I hope that Berger can stay low owned, because I thought for sure that with the kind of form that he's shown this year, that people would just run right back. I know the last few times out maybe haven't been the best out there for Daniel Berger, but it's not like he's playing terribly either. So there are a few guys that are like Keegan. He kind of stands out to me. I think I mentioned that one before too, where they're maybe not playing as good a golf as some of these other guys around them. That's why they're going to be lower owned. But like you said, long-term, they're the same, if not better players in most cases. And I'll take that shot all day. Like Corey Connors, he's not really scaring me out there for any tour event. Like same thing with guys like an Akshay. I love him to death. One of my favorite players to follow out there. One of the nicest guys out there on tour. But neither one, at least to me, has that killer instinct that I'm scared of fading out there at like 25, 30%. So we'll see what happens with guys like Berger, a Keegan Bradley, because if I can get them at anywhere close to the low teens ownership, I'm probably going to be 25, 30% on both of those guys, if not even more leverage.
Yeah, I'm curious how you look at this, because it's a prime example. I always tell people, for, like you said, the situation with Berger is quite interesting. We'll see if he stays there, but $100 less than Akshay. No, he did not play here at all recently, in the last few years. And obviously, Akshay got the win here last year, but before the win here last year, Akshay 46th and a missed cut. So the win is like weighing a ton more. I get it. But when people say, okay, recent form, 3rd, miscut, 9th, 32nd, 22nd. In the exact same period, pretty much, Daniel Berger, 20th, 15th, 25th, 12th, 2nd. The 12th and the 15th could be a 9th. It's one stroke away from being the same as Bhatia, but magically, it's got to be Bhatia, because everybody knows that 2025 is the exact same as 2024, and the same thing has to happen, right? But it's just funny. People don't flip that and reverse it and look at it at all like that. As good as anybody does, that one stroke on the tour can change it. The 12th and the 15th could be T8 and T7 or something at those weeks, versus you'd now see 2nd, 7th, 7th or something versus 9th, 9th, 3rd. There's even a missed cut. Well, Berger didn't miss the cut in between there. Bhatia did. And, at the same event, he missed the cut. Berger finished 15th. So it's just interesting when you see stuff like that. And when I'm looking for pivots, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And even as the week goes on, it's only Tuesday afternoon, and Bhatia stays in check. I should say stabilizes at kind of a number. We'll get to it, whatever it comes out at. But let's say Berger does creep up a little. Those are the plays that I'm talking about, where in single entry, it's actually leans probably more to Bhatia, even more than like the lottery, which brings it off of Berger in some cases, majority of times. And then the other concept to that is it's like, that's one of the guys I'm talking about where like everybody knows it's a good play on paper coming in, but they won't commit enough to it. And they'll just let Bhatia go. And that's, Saber just gave me a bunch more Bhatia. You can literally press a few buttons and change that in a heartbeat to swap it around. Now, all you got to do, go back here to Saber, go to Bhatia. And again, I'm not saying you should be always manipulating everything, but if you see a 66 and a 62.75, magic. Boom. Just flip the projection. Like little things like that. Oh yeah, Nick, this is a good one too. Fair, Nick, guys just prepping. Scotty and Rory, they're heroes though. They're so good that they did everything possible to show they had the form except win. They didn't waste their win last week because they're saving it for the Masters, but their prep went so well that they both finished near the very top of the leaderboard until the end. So yeah, we know about the prepping for the Masters and whatnot. That did not play out well for anybody on that narrative. So anyway, back to it. 9K range, I think that just shows we've got some options there. You said you had some takes in the 8K range, and to relate it to what we always talk about on here, Luke, before you get to those options and why you're on them and whatnot, it does look pretty clean cut to me that the most you'll see in typical lineups is one 8K guy. It looks like 4 7s or 3 7s and an 8 is going to be a very popular build. And you're going to make cases for multiple 8K guys on, again, not saying you have to play them all together, but if you have that many, at least a few that you have interest in, that makes for some very interesting roster construction. So talk to us about this 8K range, Keith Mitchell down to Sam Stevens with today's withdrawal of Jacob Bridgman.
Yeah. So in that range, I mean, I've got 4 guys that I was on a Monday that I was like, I love these guys for this golf course, one reason or another. And I had 2 guys in that range, and Bud Colley, Bridgman, that I said, if anyone's going to play anyone in this range, it's like obviously these 2 guys. So if you can find anyone in this 8K range that has a pulse, then you could be looking at sub 10% ownership. So on my preview, I talked about Sam Burns and Matt McNeely as 2 of those players, and they're not particularly great course fits. Neither one's also playing particularly good golf. I think that's why a lot of these guys are going overlooked, but they're tour winners. They're guys that have shown up in big time fields before, and would be overly surprised if any of those talented players finish top 10 in this kind of event. I know that I wouldn't. So I think there's a lot of guys in this range that kind of fit that sort of narrative. Those were the 2 high upside players that I was looking at, and they were at least 50 to 1 apiece too. So it's not like they were low odds players or anything like that. But there's a few other guys in that range. Like I'll point out Poston here as well. Poston's starting to find the putter. He fits these shorter tracks. And at the comp courses that I'm looking at for this week, which are, let me double check on the other tab over here. It's TPC Summerlin for the Shriners, Port Royal with Bermuda, then the Pebble Beach Pro-Am out there in the West Coast. He's had top 10 finishes at all 3 of those sort of events. So I think that there's guys in this range. It doesn't have to be those players. If it's a Tony Finau, you like the fact that he's just a high pedigree player in this sort of field. The Sam Stevens, I mean, he's been chalky over here the early part of 2025 at times. Tom Kim, I know a lot of people like Tom Sim for what they've seen on the TGL. Any of those sort of players, if you think any of them have a pulse, if the 8K range is going as overlooked as what these early projections look like, then it could be the spot to get different, right? You could still take your Akshay, even your Corey Connors if you want to up top. If you're mixing in one of these 8K guys, then it could make up for that kind of chalk. So it's good to see some of those ownership trends coming in, this portion of the board maybe being a little bit overlooked, because I think there's a lot of high upside players here. Guys that could miss the cut, but guys I could see finishing top 5, top 10 too.
Love how you put that. Also dying laughing inside at the Tom Sim. I've never seen somebody so hyped up for that. It was like just we've seen him at the President's Cup. We've seen him at all these different events. I was at President's Cup, got to see that stuff live. He is a hype man for sure. But at the same time, it's like, man, it's chill out. Let's keep it rolling here. So I think if you see Tom Kim as a guy, then I would mix him in. But I do think you nailed the point that I would have had in this range and couldn't have said it better myself, is like this range is pedigree guys that right now are boom bust guys, unfortunately. Like, yeah, there's the chance they just suck, but you're playing them for what the upside could be, because no one's going to like me trying to say like play Finau. But at the same token, it's like, again, recently 32nd, 36, miscut, nothing great. But before that, he did have a 5th mixed in, a 13. We know what he's capable, but he just hasn't been consistent. And so you're not going to find much consistency in here. Sam Burns, a couple of miscuts. Tom Kim, 36th, 42nd. But man, you got to think, looking on paper, even Siwoo Kim, the miscut recently, but before that, 38th, 19th, 24th. Like, he's had some good results. That's kind of why they're fair priced. But you're going to want to take on that risk. It's not going to surprise you. Look, we've seen some crazy guys be at the top of the leaderboard lately. They're like, whoa, they're back. Like, that happened that quick. This is that exact range right here. When you talk about Finau, Siwoo, Burns, Tom Kim, McNeely, those guys. And then you have outsiders and some that have shown up some lately of like Keith Mitchell. We got Poston, who you mentioned for some recent stuff, and other comp stuff. And then you've got Sam Stevens. So it's not to name everyone. It's to say it's not who you play. It's how you play them. Like I always talk about, maybe you don't want to jam 3 or 4 of those guys that are all boom bust in this range, but you should not shy away from getting a couple of these guys in your lineup and hoping they're the ones that pop, while being in a different roster construction. Because like I told you, there's not many builds in here. Like here's one as an example: Connors, Siwoo, Colley, McNeely,
Wow.
Rico, Hassler. Like these are the types of builds that would be more unique. They start to pop a little bit more down the board in this stuff, but for the most part, it's 10-9-8 with 3 7s, 10-9-8, a couple 8s in this one. So, but you're not seeing it very much, and most of them skip over 9-9, 8-8, 7-7. That could be different, but yeah, a lot of lineups are going at most one 8K guy, if not none, where you're seeing them just drop into the 4-7K guys. I had a few here earlier that I was looking at, but I might have shifted it around. But yeah, in general, not seeing too many people go to these 8Ks. So I think that's at least somewhat interesting to consider it. Anything else there? If not, we can talk about this 7K range. The upper 7K range, specifically 7,500 and up. There's only like 13 golfers there. So maybe you could pick a few and talk about them.
Yeah. One question before we move on there, just I guess out of curiosity, where do you think Sam Burns comes in with the ownership? Like I can't see many people other than myself really wanting to play him this week. And I hope maybe it's wishful thinking, but 10%, something like that.
I would say 10 or under. Yeah. Just because even when people are making, I'll call it that decision, like a thought process like that, I still think they'll lean to more of a Finau, a Siwoo, even a Poston. Mm-hmm. Poston's a guy that people always think is going to be sneaky and then somehow still gets a little bit of the ownership there. So we'll keep an eye on that. But tee times did just come out. So I'm getting a quick glance here while we're live, just at seeing how it's setting up. So like AM, PM, I'm just trying to find. So Fleetwood, Cantlay are AM, PM. Hideki is the opposite. Anybody else? I'm just trying to see if I can quickly run through the Ludwig, the stuff up top, right? That's what I'm trying to find, but it's harder on the fly. I mean, there's a lot of guys in this AM, PM for sure. Post and Siwoo, Sam Stevens, AM, PM. All these guys are AM, PM that I'm listing off. Then you've got, who else? Burns, Fleetwood, Finau, Cantlay, Tom Kim, Knapp, McCarthy. So a lot of AM, PM, they want to feature them in that afternoon tee time there on Friday. But Ludwig and Connors, amongst others, are both, and Bhatia as well, are both PM, AM. And that includes, that's pretty split actually then, Luke, because Decky, Keegan, Spieth, Ludwig, McNeely, Bhatia, Connors are all PM, AM. So Berger as well in that bunch. So yeah, I think the tee times are pretty split. Gotta love that, and think that that's a good thing when it gets you, if you're building in sets, because you can mix it up that way. Or if you're going to not build in any sets, you're not going to play these waves, you could just mix in the guys top and bottom. You'll have both things covered.
Yeah, I like that too. Like whenever it's all the studs playing on one side versus the other, like they happen at the Players, sometimes it makes it a little bit of a headache. So I like this setup for sure. And I don't really have a lean versus one or the other, because if there's thunderstorms and they delay it, then it can flip. So I'm going to wait on that.
I just like that we can build good lineups if you are doing it that way, which I always like to. I think that I do like when you have it more split like that, so it's not so one-sided, or somebody might be, let's say somebody that when they don't do it like that and someone gets to 18% overall, they may be way higher in the wave split lineup. So they likely are, because it's kind of the only option there. And you see it in Showdown an absolute ton, where it's like Decky and two other guys are in the morning wave and we're playing Showdown wave advantage. And all of a sudden Decky gets popped up to like 56%. And you're like, holy, so like, but it's because everybody had the money and nobody wants to leave it. So definitely think that's a good call there, but I like the split. What do you got in this upper 7K range, Luke?
Yeah, so upper part of the 7K range, I'm expecting there to be a couple guys that are going to be real popular. Like Jake Knapp seems to most likely be the chalk of that range. But outside of that, I think you've got guys like Matty Fitz that are going to be completely overlooked. He could be sub 5% owned, I think, out there in some contests. And some guys like Ricky Fowler that I think are playing some sneaky good golf. I don't know whether the TGL cured him, did the opposite of what it did over there to Tom Kim, but Ricky Fowler started to play some consistent golf for the first time in quite some time. And I think just like the top end of the board, this is a week where I think it could be a little bit of lazy ownership. You get guys like Knapp that could be close to, I think he's going to be at least 10% ownership. That's my early take over here on a Monday. If that's going to be the case, I'll avoid the Jake Knapps of the world and try and take some pivots. And I don't know what we're going to get on the Ben Griffin ownership. He's my favorite player towards that portion of the board. And partially just the course fit. I got a decent number on him. I bet I'm outright this week as well. But even if he's chalky this week, if he's going to be close to 10% or even over that ownership, then I'll probably jump ship on that sort of play in my single entry. So it's kind of like the top end of the board. I don't think there's anyone here that should be 15-20% owned. And if we're going to get that, then I'm out.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because, like, Bud Cauley, 8,300, I get it. But when you go to Ben Griffin, Jake Knapp, maybe even Rico down here at 7,600, who's been playing some good golf, came back around again and also had a good result here last year, finishing 14th in his only time playing it. I think you could see the top of the 7K range and then Bud Cauley in the 8K range being the popular options. And you, again, if you're looking at recent form, if you're looking at everything, sure, it feels safe, but you also have Sam Burns and the guys we talked about just above that, where it's like yes, the risk is there, but it's not as much about who the play is as much as what it does for us in our lineups. And yeah, it's a boom bust risk reward type play, but I'm always feeling pretty comfortable with that, especially on lazier weeks where this ownership gets even more inflated on some of these guys. So we'll see what people have to say about that. I thought right at 7,500, we'll see how he goes, but Lee Hodges was coming back from, I think it was an injury or whatever was going on with him. And he came back last week and finished 11th, which was a good first showing. And I was like him, and he's kind of right there in the middle at 7,500. Trying to see some of the other guys. I think you nailed it with, the Jake Knapp call. Ben Griffin, by the way, don't know how he could get top 20 playing 12 weeks in a row. I mean, they told me there's no way these guys can still play good golf when they played that many weeks in a row and then comes back out and gets 18th. So, he's excited. I saw he was playing along with the jokes. I think it was Jason Sobel posted out that everyone keeps saying like, oh, I wasn't even going to play this week, but then I did. And then he posted it. And I was like, oh, I will. I guess I shouldn't play this week, but I will again. And he's going along with the joke. So he knows he's playing a lot of weeks in a row, but still playing some really good golf. And 7,900 seems pretty fair, but I think it will lead to some of the ownership there. So I think Griffin, Knapp, for some reason, people always like Harry Hall, and I guess he's up and down, but another 18th last week, couple good outings here the last couple of years. I know one's a 58th, but it still got through and made the cut. And then Rico Hoey, I think those will be the more popular options. And there is other golfers in between. You talked about Ricky Fowler, Kitayama, signs of life again lately, 39th and 33rd, two of his last three. It's not the best, but at 7,600, that can always be a little bit better as well. It can be a little bit worse too, but definitely think that's something. So there's other options in this range. What about the lower 7K here? Is there any other options that stand out? Because I will say from a roster construction standpoint, we saw it in those lineups earlier. These will get dispersed quite nicely. Like, I don't think anyone's going to be super chalky. Maybe one or two pick up a bunch of steam, but overall, I don't see it being super popular down here because there's just too many options. Maybe Smalley and Hostler are the two that I see standing out early on.
One thing I'll say before I talk about the bottom end is also Ben Griffin, Masters snub. He's going to miss out by one spot. So maybe he tries to stick it to the man a little bit and go out there and win this week. But down towards the bottom, yes, Smalley's the one guy that looks like he's projecting out the best on a points per dollar basis. I actually like him this week, but not enough to play him at like over 10% ownership. Let me see who else kind of grades out as more popular. Sam Ryder, believe it or not, I've got projecting out quite well, so I could see him getting some steam. Victor Perez, he's about 60, about a 65-point projection, and that's actually, I think, by far the best out there towards the bottom end of the sevens. I could see him getting some steam, maybe even a wacky Valimaki over there at $7,100. But outside of those like 4, maybe 5 guys that I've got projecting for just over 60 fantasy points, it's a lot of guys in those mid-50s. A lot of guys like maybe getting close to the top 50s when it comes to their point projections, which a lot of my projections that I run are based on recent form. So it usually gives me a really good idea of where a lot of the chalk is going to come in. And like those 4 or 5, I think are probably going to get a lot of this steam because on a lazy week like this, especially down low, that's normally what people look at. They just play the guys that are in form, the players that are normally like top 30, top 40 out there in their recent form ranking. I do that over the last 12 rounds. That's usually what a lot of people will use, especially like your casuals out there for their recent form stuff. I feel like those sort of like 4 or 5 players are about it. Outside of that, you're going to get a lot of sub 5%ers, it looks like.
Yeah, one thing I'll note too, we didn't spend a bunch of time on it, but the chat brought it up too. Also in that upper 7K range is Gary Woodland, who had the crazy round on Sunday. He tied Valimaki for the course record, but could have been one better. It was like the 17th or something where he just missed dropping it for an extra stroke there. Could have been 9 under instead and shot a 61. So if he carries that over, but the thing about him I noticed is not just the second last week, but his history here is 6th and 8th in 2 of the last 4 years. He didn't play the last 2. Obviously had the health stuff going on, and awesome to see him get through that. Anybody who watched Full Swing, that was a tough episode to get through, just seeing him go through that. So shout out to Gary Woodland, great dude, obviously, but that was interesting that, you look at his numbers. I think he's a guy that just leads to my roster construction thoughts of people are going to want to be able to get to that range and fill it up with guys in there. And I think there is guys that you can go to down below here, like you mentioned, some of those options outside of Smalley, Hostler, maybe a couple others. There's dudes down here that you can play. Could you play any Cam Young and Max Homa as the versions of the 8K guys that we were talking about there? What are you doing with those guys?
Yeah, so I sent a message to my guy Nick earlier about Homa's shots gained metrics over the last 5 years. It's a steady lineup. About 2 years from now, it was steady lineup looking great. He's becoming one of the best players in the world. And then the exact same slope down ever since 2023. So Homa, maybe if you're in a large field GBP, you play him in a few lineups for that upside. It's the same thing with Cam Young. I mean, he's on that same sort of stretch lately where it's such a tough scene to see a player that talented playing so poorly. But they're always that talented. They say golf's like riding a bike at some point. It just snaps and you get back into it. I'll never write off somebody that's gone out there and won 6 times, like what you've had with the Max Homa. And Cam Young, no tour wins to this point. I know it's a meme. You'll probably never get over that winner's circle at this stage. But he has a ton of top 5, top 10s that'll get you there at the low 7K range of DFS. So I think the price tag has gone to a point now where we don't need them to top 5 to get there in DFS. And when they were in the 8, 9K range, they did. And when they're broken, maybe they're not worth playing at that sort of price tag. But lower 7K range, even if they finish in, like, let's say a T12 or something like that this week, if they're one of the top 10 birdie makers in the field, they go out there, they fill it up on the greens, they can get there that way, out there from the scoring aspect. So I think if there's a time to do it and a time and place, it would be large field GBPs and maybe at a weaker field event like this, like Masters tournament. No, thank you. Like, I'm not touching those players with a 10-foot pole. You couldn't even pay my entries for me to make me go out there and enter those sort of players. But this week, for sure, like, you could consider that.
It's crazy. Both are in the Masters. So people were talking in the chat earlier about the snubs. Like, I don't think Fowler's in. I don't think Charlie Hoffman's in. I don't think Griffin's in. Like you talked about, all those guys. Just looking at the field right now, at least, maybe they haven't updated it, but I don't see any of those guys in. But of course, these guys are from previous results, and I get all that. That's how it works. That's supposed to be the benefit of the meritocracy, and they played their way, and that still counts for something. It counts the same for everybody equally, the way it worked out. But I will say, it could be a bad take, but I feel more like if Homa could just figure it out for a round, it's like I could see it more like he gets back in the zone. He himself has talked about one good, swing thought, and then it can all flip. Yep. Versus Young, I just never trust. And I heard some things about him from, like, when Paul Tesori was on the bag for just a minute and then bailed, that they're just like, him and his dad are so stuck in their ways, and it's like they're not going to find their way out of it. They want to fight through it versus get to a result. And with Homa, I think, there's a chance that he just got too much onto a pedestal. All those wins, and people were calling him like top 5 in the world. The guy, it was a crazy run. It was sick. Awesome. It's what every golfer wants, but you can't just go right to that top pedestal. And he couldn't figure it out in majors for a while there. I think he had one good result in a major since or something, but beyond that, wasn't really possible. So when I'm playing an option like that, yeah, I feel like Nick does here. I'll be playing Homa. No idea if I'm sick enough to play Young. I'd have to be. That's all I'm feeling. You're stating my feelings for me, so I appreciate you. That's kind of that. And he was making fun of Full Swing. They do have like a super full segment on the Zurich Classic, as if it's an event anybody cares about. Nick, I know you live there, so shout out to New Orleans, but I'm just saying it's not going to be much beyond that. That's a week I used to take vacation on, so it's not a big one when it comes to that. There's no real specialty there, but Homa does seem somewhat interesting from that token, just to kind of think of it from that perspective. If he's your version, maybe you can't stomach, I don't know, Sam Burns or Finau. Someone said earlier that 1-inch putt that Finau missed was enough for me to ever play him again ever. I get it, but maybe then you just get to save that money and go down to Homa and be a sicko that way instead, and look for another guy that sort of fell off a little bit and see if he can find his way back. Man, though, this field should be the spot to do it. Like, we're about to get to the 6K range. How many guys in the 6K range this week? Let me see. We got 84, 83, 87, adding the Qs, probably 87 guys, I think. Mm-hmm. And I don't really have more than 2 or 3 to talk about. So, I mean, that also goes over to like actual golfer and skill and potential. I guess people will make their cases here, but let me know in the chat, who are some of the 6K guys you like, and we can look up some stuff on them and just see what Luke thinks, all of that. But Luke, what are you doing here? We talked a little bit about it earlier. Is there a few guys that stand out for you? And I'm curious, how do you usually handle the 6K range when the field's set up like this? I've got some thoughts.
Yeah, so 6K range, I try and commit to my guys. And I think I've heard you talk about this before. So I have a feeling that you have a similar philosophy on it, is that like if you're going to play 6K guy, you can't use him in like 2% of your lineups, because even on 150 max, that's 3 of your set of 150. The odds that you're going to get the other 5 guys right with just 3 lineups with a player is slim to none. So especially if you're in the GPP where you have to have the absolute nuts. So I normally try and take them in at least 5-7% of my lineups down here if I'm using them in 150 max. But I look for upside purely. Like in terms of made cut percentage, and there's some people will be like, I just want my guy to get through the cut line, that sort of thing. I could care less if my guys in the 6K range miss the cut. I'm looking for the guys that pop for those top 10s, top 15s, which I mean, top 15 down here at like $6,500, that probably gets the job done out there in most contests, probably even the large field GPP. So I'm just looking for guys that have that potential, that have that pop ability. That's why last week I was on guys like Toasty, Chris Gotterup. He didn't get there by any means, Gotterup, but those sort of players, when they play well, they normally top 10, top 15. That's what I look for in the 6K range. And I'll bring on a whole bunch of missed cut equity with these sort of players, but I'm also not using a 6K range guy in every single lineup that I'm playing. So one that kind of stands out, it's the only one that I have any sort of bet on this week, is Peter Malnati, and he happens to be $6,100. So he is as cheap as you could possibly go, which I don't even know if I'm going to need the salary. So this could just be more of a bet for me this week, but he's played decently at this course before. In fact, to go down to his course history here, and this is another thing I look for in some of these players down low, are guys that have shown it at this golf course before. Mm-hmm. Peter Malnati has 2 top 25 finishes in his last 4 starts here, which for a 6K range guy, that's as good a course history as you can find. And 3 of the 4 of those were made cuts. So he's the kind of guy who's shown a pulse out there before. And I took him for a top 20 at plus 1,500. So obviously the books don't have a lot of confidence in him if they're going to put a plus 1,500 number out there in the top 20. But those are the kind of guys that I'll play down low. The ones that when they actually have their fastball, are capable of that top 10, top 15. And I only had 3 actually in my player pool as of now. Was Malnati, as I just mentioned, and then Danny Walker, who I really hope that no one else plays him this week, because I'm not going to play him with any sort of ownership behind him. And then Henrik Norlander too, all kind of modeling out well for this golf course. Shorter, more positional guys that hit their irons well.
I was in the same camp with you on Norlander. He's one that I was going to mention. I didn't get there on Malnati, and that's where I'm probably with Nick on being a sicko. Like, find $900 and play Homa, even though it's probably not better. It's just like, it's 900. I get it, but I'm just saying there's definitely ways to do it. Our guy Ryan, who's not here right now, but he usually is, loves EVR. EVR is 6,800, I think, this week. But
isn't it well?
One thing that I saw here, I was trying to find EVR. So EVR, again, boom bust opportunity. Like, he recently had a 9th. He's got some 30ths. He's got some, good finishes like that. But Jeremy Paul, 16th, 22nd, 25th. Again, if I'm going to play someone down here, it's probably the boom bust. That's what I'm looking for. And then Vincent Whaley was like a Henrik Norlander Jr., and he's also played well here in the past. Made the cut all 3 times, a 29th and a 34th. In there 3 of the last 4 years. So that he only played it 3 of the last 4 years. So I thought he was interesting. I like your Danny Walker call. I just think he's a guy that plays strong. Like, he's aggressive. It's going to do or do not. And that's okay. I mean, people worry about that too much. You need the do's. And in order to get to the do's, sometimes you need the do nots. And, I'm going to sit here. If I just get him to make the cut, and then you're sitting there on Sunday and he's T67. Like, exactly. Wow, good job. Like, it literally meant shit. So you got to actually take the risk. What's that?
I'd rather my guy miss the cut and just get the hope over with then, because like you're sweating out something that has no chance finishing the 60th.
Exactly. And that's why when our guy earlier, I was agreeing with him when he said like, good in, good out, garbage. It's to me, good in is that. It sucks when it's a 5 or 6 and I'm staring at it on Sunday, but was the T67 from the dude that made the cut really going to change my life? No. And he had no shot. Probably. So you think, you're not better because you scored more and you made and you got a 6 of 6. People need to realize that. That's the whole point of roster construction and all this mattering. Again, you need 6 of 6 and then hopefully give yourself a shot from there. But it also can be correlated to your roster construction. And that's why I said, if I have a guy that misses the cut, but he was the type of guy that if he had made the cut is like, boom, hit the roof for me, top 20, with scoring to go with it, whatever that might be, using just a low price guy as the example for this one. Well, your guy that was like a T40th or T35, again, can anything happen? Of course it can. I'm always going to talk about that. But in general, it's like if you're too safe with the build just to get that and then hoping for the best, a lot of the time that's not better in some cases. And did you have any quick take on this Stephen Fisk guy? 28th, 4th, 17th, another guy, 2 missed cuts in there, but to me, same type of idea, right? Give me that boom bust over the guy that finishes, all the time. Like, I guess it's always tough to give examples because then people will shit on you. But I was going to say Chad Ramey. Like, yeah, but he won before. He won in like a Wind Fest Puerto Rico Open or something, but there could be wind here, so maybe he fits it. But just to note, 47th, miscut, 34th, miscut, 48th, miscut. Like, where is the boom there? Well, the boom happened at the Puerto Rico Open 3 years ago or whenever it was, but is it going to happen again? I don't know, but it just makes it real tricky when you need some of these guys to do a little bit more. Any thoughts on that or anything on Fisk there?
So Fisk, bomber. Guy can really move the ball, and a lot of those guys are boom bust sort of players. And on the Korn Ferry Tour, he had a stretch where he went 4th, 20th, 3rd, 2nd, cut, then 3rd. So he's the sort of guy that when he's playing well, he'll like maintain it. It looks like for a month, maybe even 2 months at a time. And after that stretch, he went 61st, cut, did have a T12, and then a bunch of missed cuts over there on the Korn Ferry Tour. So he's one of those high upside guys that you're talking about in the 6K range where he might miss the cut more often than he makes it. But when he actually gets there, he's proven it. And I know Korn Ferry Tour, it's a step down in terms of talent level, but finishing top 3 over on that tour is not an easy feat. He went out there, he earned his tour card essentially from just a month and a half of good golf over there on that side. Those are the kind of guys that I like down low. And to kind of get back to the EVR take that you're giving before, because I really like that. Danny Walker, by the way, number 1 out there at the bottom end of the field when it comes to ball striking heading in. Number 2 is EVR out there in that category. So, if I'm looking for guys down low, it's the upside. And then, maybe some ball striking poppers heading in, because even a guy like Walker, EVR, that might get some attention because of those shots gained metrics, they're going to be at most maybe 3-4% owned. And that would be even stretching it, I'd say, on those sort of players. There's going to be a ton of leverage to be had there on anyone you play.
Yeah. Victor Perez, by the way, somebody brought him up and I pulled him up in DGen's notes there just to see it quickly, but really hot form coming in right now. He's got the setup right now is 18th, 22nd, and 18th on the 3 coming in. He did play here last year. He made the cut. He is 7,100. At 72, I got a guy right above him here that's also coming off a missed cut, but 36th the week before that. I think he has upside. We've seen him at higher prices in these weaker events. Not here, he's not going to pop at those price tags, but at 7,200, Olesen, he got a 14th here last year. I don't mind my guy Meisner. He's at a 39th, a 28th the last 2 weeks, and then he finished 10th here last year. These guys are outside of the 6K range, but just to note some other options there that I think you could roll with, that it doesn't seem like as many are going to go. Again, these are bottom 7K guys. And I just think we just talked about earlier. So many people are going to land in the low 8s or the upper 7s and maybe only be able to pick one of these guys or need one of these guys to fill out the roster construction. When if you put 2 of these guys, 3 of these guys, we just made cases for a bunch. You can put those guys together and then fit whatever you want at the top. So everybody has their guys, but I definitely side with you and you side with me, I guess, on what we were talking about. When someone says, who's a guy down here, they're going to say, the Danny Walker take is a great one. You're going to commit to him. You're going to play Danny Walker this week, as am I. It's like Danny Walker, you're either in or you're out. You're going to go with it or not. Someone else is going to play a bunch of lineups, 20 max, let's call it. They'll say, I had Danny Walker too. Knew he was going to crush it. Well, how many lineups did you play him in? 1. So you were trying to literally shoot from just one shot. And you need Danny Walker to have a good week to matter, first of all. Then you need all the other shit to go right. That's 5 more spots. Roster construction, the people that you've got, the players, the results, all that. And everyone will say, that's the same for everything. It's not. Because if I'm playing 150 and I go 10% Danny Walker and commit to him, I've now got 15 lineups, Danny Walker. That's most are putting in 20 lineups or less. I've got him alone in 15 lineups on top of I still have my portfolio available to me with 135 more lineups. So does that mean I'll get it right? No. But it means if I do get it right, that's one less thing I need to get right. And I actually have outs to the other spots to be able to get my entire lineup right, which is the ultimate goal to get it up to the top. One shot, one opportunity, my friend. Yes, that's why they have They got single entry for you, you and your mom's spaghetti. So you can go there and play that one this week. I don't have too much else, Luke. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we get out of here, man? I really enjoyed doing this with you. I hope everybody liked the show, but I think we broke it down pretty good and gave everybody a good insight. You'll have more tomorrow night over on your YouTube channel, which you can let the people know where to find you at.
Absolutely. No, it was a blast talking about all the golf this week. I'll have to say I love the Thunder Bear this week too. Actually bet them outright at 100-1. So I'm right there with you. And yeah, tomorrow on my YouTube channel, that'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time on the GS Luke DFS YouTube. I'll be talking about all of your questions down there in the chat, little weather talk, which based on what we have on Friday could be pretty important out there for this week. So make sure to stop by for that, as well as the showdown streams, which we'll be doing on this YouTube channel out there for rounds 2 through 4.
Yeah, we got you covered. Luke's the man. We really appreciate everything that you're doing for us over at the nation. The community loves it. Hopefully get more of this in the future. But thank you guys for watching. Again, if you didn't check out the promo, you want to get in, you want to get access to SaberSim, everything we talked about over there, the best deal is right now. It doesn't matter if you've been a member before, whatever it is, you can come back. If you're starting fresh, it's the best time to do it. $49 for your first month. That's all access. That's all the UFC events, all the NASCAR events, the Masters next week amongst this week and the other PGA events. MLB is back. NBA and the playoffs upcoming. NHL and the playoffs upcoming. The Discord, the education courses, everything you want and more. That's going to do it for this one, guys. We appreciate you watching. Shout out to our guy, again, GS Luke, for coming on. For myself, ToeTagginTambo, let's ship it!